welcome to episode 63 of Little Big Knits. My name is Selma, I'm your host, and I am coming to you from a beautifully sunny Ottawa here in Canada, where I live with the family and the cat, Yoda, who's walking around. Will she make an appearance? Good question. Welcome to this episode. Welcome to returning viewers as well as new viewers. Hello. Hope you will enjoy the podcast. What have I got for you today? Well, I'm not quite sure what I used as a title, but this could be called the acquisition episode, I feel. After not buying yarn for 3 months, pretty much, I seem to have splurged. So, after showing you my finished object, the elephant in the room, as well as my works in progress, I'll be showing you what I got at Knit City Montreal and telling you a little bit about Knit City Montreal as well. And there'll be footage of that event at the end of the program, what I was able to get. But I'll tell you all about that a little later. And yeah, so hello. This is actually Easter weekend that I'm recording this. It's Easter Friday. But this probably won't get uploaded until perhaps Saturday or Sunday because I'm going away today for one night with a friend and her family, and or I should say we are going away. And we're going away for one night, then I'm coming back tomorrow, Saturday, hopefully editing and uploading Saturday evening. If not, it'll be Sunday morning before we head out to Montreal to see our child, our son, who's there. And he's just about to start exams, was feeling very stressed out about coming home. So he said, we'll just come there so that he could study as much as possible. He's got a very heavy term with maths, 2 maths, physics, biology, and chemistry, I believe. So that's what he decided to take. What can I tell you? So we'll be going there. So I don't know exactly, all this to say, I don't know exactly when this will get uploaded, but it will get uploaded. So before I start talking about this FO, finished object, I would like to tell you about our make-along, because this would definitely be an entry in that make-along. We have the LBK Connections Mal. So it's a make-along because it includes any craft. Although obviously we're kind of knitting heavy around here, so most of the projects that have been put in are knitting related. But sewing, weaving, crochet are also welcome. Embroidery, any sort of making that you are doing that is bringing connection to you. So perhaps the materials were given to you, whether it's the fabric or the yarn or the pattern, or you are making something for someone else, whether it be somebody you know or somebody you don't know. So there is some charity knitting happening in there as well. So feel free to participate in the Ravelry group called Little Big Knits, or with the hashtag on Instagram called LBK Mal. LBK Connections Mal, I should say. Don't listen to me. Read the hashtag down here. So there you go. You're welcome to join in. And so with that, let me segue into what I am wearing, because this is my most recently finished make. And I'll tell you the yarn first because it fits into the make along. I used 2 yarns here, but the blue yarn principally is what fits into the make along. This is the Stolen Stitches Nua Sport Weight. That was given to me by my friend Kate, and I originally thought that I would pair it with mohair and make a second Felix sweater by Amy Christoffers, but when I saw Mega's version from the Skeins of Dreams podcast, when I saw her version of this sweater, I absolutely fell in love with it and decided that I would use the Nua for it. So this is the Nua Stolen Stitches, the Sport Weight, and I think it's something to do with, oh dear, something to do with the Dark Night, Paris at Night. No, not Paris at Night. Something about Dark Night. It's a beautiful, beautiful blue and absolutely stunning. And I paired it with some Holtz yarn in their Tides base, which is a wool silk blend, which is the fuchsia colorway. And it made this lovely, lovely combination. I have to say, I really enjoyed both yarns. The Nua is a spectacular yarn, spectacular. I could definitely see myself working with it again. It was an absolute joy to work with. So thank you so much, Kate, for introducing me to this yarn. I know that she very much likes it. And I know a friend of mine has also mentioned how she just absolutely loves this yarn. And I have to agree. It's got a tweediness to it, which you can see there. And as a result, the little cables in this sweater, which I still haven't talked about, kind of get lost. But the yarn itself is gorgeous. I think it's an 80% wool, 20% linen. So the linen is what gives the heatheriness to the yarn. Really, really stunning yarn. And what did I make with this yarn? I made the Kevät, which means spring actually in Finnish. This is a design by Katlyn Hunter. And as I said, I was inspired by Mega of Skeins of Dreams. I had never seen this pattern and I certainly wouldn't have paid any attention to it because I think her front pattern picture doesn't really do it justice. But I just loved Mega's version. She had done hers in kind of dusty, salmony, pinky kind of color with, I believe, like a dark gray or a black up here for the color work. And I knew that I wanted to do it in the Nua, and I knew that I wanted to do it with something pinky purpley. So I went into my stash and actually my giveaway box and found this skein. And I really enjoyed the Holtz Tides. I'm going to show you soon. I keep thinking about doing it and then it doesn't happen. One of the knits that I made with their yarn, I'm extremely disappointed with. I used their Holtz, their Coast based, which is a, I believe, 30 cotton, 70 merino. And it's so brittle that the piece has gotten holes in it. It snags and it just gets a hole. It really is not a very strong yarn and I've been very disappointed by it. And I had to have it, my mother-in-law was here when I was working on it and she darned it because while I was working on it, it got holes and then it's gotten additional holes. So I would never work with that yarn again. Certainly not single strand, perhaps stranded twice, like double stranded or with something else myself. I hope that other people have had more success. I hope that I just got a crappy batch, but I was very disappointed in it. I would very much like to try their what's it called? Their 100% wool. It's not coming to me right now. But this one, I'm actually really, really impressed with. It is actually quite a strong yarn, and because it's got a silk content in it, it's got a little bit of a heatheriness happening to it as well. So it worked beautifully with this blue. And yeah, so I'm going to show it to you. But somebody actually asked last time if I could show the floats of my works. It just never occurs to me. I have to say that while I was knitting on this, I thought, oh my gosh, my floats are going to be terrible. I just seem to be having a hard time keeping my tension. But my floats ended up absolutely great. So I'll just plunk in a little video of it here so that you can see what they look like. Really quite even though it did not feel like that while I was knitting the sweater. So I'll make sure to show my float sometimes because I think it's something that interests people. But I have to say that I probably, if I had shown the floats to you while I was working on it, as opposed to after wetting it and blocking it, I think they would have looked quite different, as does color work often, right? And the stitch definition. While you're knitting on a garment, doesn't always look so great. And then once it's blocked, everything just blooms or settles really, really nicely. So this has got an all over lace. This was such a fun knit. I cannot tell you. I would make this again, although at the same time, it's such a special piece in a way that, you know, it's sort of a funny thing to have multiple times, although I could see it in like a cream color with like a softer color here. That could be very nice. So as I said, you got cables, you got color work and baubles, you got some lace, simple, lovely lace, and you got more color work. That was supposed to have baubles. I opted against the baubles, partly because, I don't know, it felt like a lot of baubles. I was also concerned about how much yarn I would have. I would have had enough of the fuchsia color, but I didn't realize that at the time. And yeah, I just decided to keep it simple. That's actually what Mega had done as well. So I was just being a total copycat. So I just did more color, the color work here, and then you finish the sweater with lace, and there are baubles. And then the very bottom, there is a quadruple bauble little detail down here. So just really, really pretty details and a very interesting knit, especially if you enjoy knitting lace. That, as I said last time, I think simple lace is my favorite thing to knit. It's really fun to see the pattern emerge, especially if it's easily memorized. Then you just keep on going. Maybe you refer occasionally to the pattern. I really enjoy it. So this was a very entertaining knit because it just had something going on all the time. So if you're somebody who hates a sea of stockinette, this may be for you. So anyway, I really enjoyed this knit. I'm very happy to have finished it. I'm very much enjoying wearing it. I wore it to work the other day with a black skirt that I happened to be wearing again and a white blouse underneath it. So I wore it more like a vest than a top, but it's also going to be a very nice spring, early summer top. I think with the wool content and the thickness of it, because it is sport weight, it's not fingering. I think once it gets really warm here, and we do get hot summers in Canada, and I don't think I'll be able to wear it then. But this will be a lovely layering piece as well as a lovely in-between seasons piece. So that's my finished object for today. So let's move on to whips. And now what I'm going to do today is just talk about active whips that I happen to have. For example, my crochet blanket, I put on 2 squares, but I'll show it to you next time because then I will have done an entire row. I'm determined. Gertie wanted to say hello today. After all, it's spring, right? And I'm drinking fennel tea. I have been doing fennel tea in the mornings, and I always podcast in the mornings because that's when the light is the best here. And so I start my day with a cup of warm fennel tea before I move on to caffeine. And I'm not a huge caffeine drinker, by the way. I can go days without drinking it. I enjoy a good cup of tea, especially. Coffee, I've started to have issues with. I can really only handle decaf. I'm a serious lightweight. So not a lot of caffeine in the mornings for me. All right, what am I working on? So just quickly, I had showed you the last time I was making these wonderful socks that are in this wonderful bag by the Tangled Skein CA, my friend Sue. Really lovely little bag. It's been a great little sock sack, so to speak. And I have started, oh, and I'm mid-row. I have started the second sock. I had showed you the first sock of this tweed pattern of tweed yarn, which is the Regia 4-ply tweed. On Ravelry, it says that it's discontinued, and yet I was able to buy this, darn it, somewhere in the States. And I know that in Europe, people have said that there are shops stocking it. So I don't know if the newer versions are being called something different on Ravelry or what, but I bought a bunch of this a while back, and I really, really love it. I'm making this very simple cable pattern that you can see on my Ravelry page for the brown pair that I originally made in I just sort of made it up. And the one that I originally used it on, the brown pair, was called Socks for Pea. And I sort of wrote down the recipe there. And that was on 72 stitches. This one is on 66 stitches. And essentially what I did was in the panel where there is no cable in between, I eliminated 1 stitch. So I eliminated 6 stitches because there are 6 panels around the sock to accommodate a smaller foot, because the other one was made for a larger male foot. So yeah, so that's coming along. As you've heard me say, it's black, it's dark. So I work on it when I've got good light and when I'm not obsessed with knitting something else, because this took over. I did not want to knit on anything else while I was working on this. And I actually didn't knit for a full 3 days when I went to Montreal for Knit City Montreal. So I feel like I accomplished a little bit less in the last 3 weeks as a result of that, but that's okay. The other thing in this lovely bag by Amelia of Mila Sweet Makes. So I showed this to you last time. It got no love while I was working on this because I was obsessed with this, but I have since separated I just separated for the arms, for the sleeves and the body. And now I am going to be going down the body. And that is this really pretty. I'm really enjoying textures these days. I just absolutely love them. And I had thought about doing a textures knit along at some point. So that could be coming up if that's something that would interest people. We could do that perhaps at the start of the next year. But this is the Fairy Bouquet by Joanna Ang. And Joanna, I think, has maybe 4 or 5 patterns, and they're all absolutely stunning with stunning details. The other one that I want to make by her is the Koyame. I had shown that to you at one point. I'll be making that. Maybe I'll cast it on after this, although it will be made with knitted in yarn, so it's definitely more of a wintry type of garment, but I might start it during the summer and just knit on it slowly. But this, the Fairy Bouquet, is... doesn't it look like a fairy bouquet? It's just so incredibly pretty. I've just started going down the sleeves and you have this beautiful sort of butterfly detail that's made with wraps, and all the techniques on here are really fun, very simple, very effective. I'm really excited about summer, but I'm sorry that I'll have to wait to wear this for a long time because this is being knit out of 2 strands. The first strand is a fingering weight by Fine Fish Yarns in this cream color that has some subtle, I don't even know if you can see it. Would this one be more obvious? Some subtle speckling. There you can see some. This is a Fine Fish yarn, and I believe her twist sock in a colorway called Think. Terry is not dyeing anymore. I don't even know if her website is up. The other one is this undyed mohair that I got from Acme Fibres, which is a shop on the east coast of Canada where they sell undyed yarn for dyers as well as dyes. And actually my Chowgu knitting needle set came from there. My interchangeable set came from there. So I had bought a whole bunch of undyed mohair at one point, actually thinking, well, I used it for a project last year, but also thinking that I might dye some, but it's now going into this project. And so you can see some of the subtle speckling on the yarn, I hope. And it's just creating just a very delicate, beautiful sweater. I'm so in love with this. And now that I've finished this one and have gotten through the raglan increases that happen after the yoke, which I think is actually one of my favorite constructions with yokes, is when you have a yoke, but then you have a little bit of raglan increasing. I think it seems to fit really nicely. And there's less likelihood of the puckering that can sometimes happen, especially I think with larger sizes. That's what I seem to have noticed. I'm not speaking from a whole lot of experience because I only knit for my size. But when I look at projects on Ravelry for yoked sweaters, sometimes there can be puckering. I talked about that with the stripes sweater from Andrea Mowry. But when you have a yoke that uses both techniques, I think you're just a lot less likely to have that. The Ranunculus uses that technique. The new sweater that I finished had that technique as well, and this one does too. So anyway, not a whole lot else to say about this except that there is a tiny little two stitch cable detail that goes along the side. So it's not pure stockinette as I'm going down the body. And I can't guarantee that this will be finished next time because I'm not, although I'm really enjoying it so much that who knows, but I am gearing myself towards spring and summer knits more. So I do hope to have the body finished by the end of April. And then perhaps I'll aim to do the sleeves, which I have to say, when I first started this, on the first few rows of this, I thought, oh, this is going to be so tedious, but it really isn't. Now that I've gotten into it, it's a lot of fun and it's so effective and pretty. Really neat technique. In the pattern, she talks about using a cable needle, but I've just been doing it my own little way because if I can avoid an extra needle, I do. So yeah. So that is that. Oh, and one more thing I wanted to mention. I'll mention this more recent purchase. I got myself a second set of the Barber Cables. And I'm going to tell you why. So my friend Sue had given me 2 bundles like this, which is very much like the Barber Cables. Sticks onto the needle. Let's give this a try. In the same way that the Barber Cables do. Does it? Yeah, so it will stick onto the needle like that. And then the idea is that you push the stitches and put it onto there, right? But when I tried to use these on this sweater, I think because the edging is a little bit rougher and maybe because of this yarn and the heathering on it, it just would not slide onto these. So she had gotten these, I think at Michael's or perhaps online, and I think these are called pony bead cables. And I want to try them again, but I was a little disappointed that I just couldn't. I tried so hard to get them on and I thought this is just not worth it. So I ended up going back to using the Barber Cables, which I had gotten at Espace Tricot. And they're pricey. They're about 18 Canadian dollars, but they really do work like a dream. These ones, I have a feeling, at least for me, it's going to depend on the yarn that I'm using. So I'll have those as well because these really have become a very useful thing to have. Instead of having knitting needles, on this side, I didn't do it on the other side. I just tied it so that it stays on. But the Barber Cables are not slick like the other ones. They're a little bit almost frosted on the outside. So they're just not slick. So they don't slide off the stitches as easily. And so they've been really useful. So anyway, I just wanted to share that. That was one of my acquisitions from Montreal that I won't talk about again later. So that's my main work in progress. This week I started another work, but I think I'm going to be ripping it out. And let me just show you. So this is the bag that this project was housed in, and now my next sweater project is in here. And it is the Anker Tee by Petite Knit. I got this wonderful yarn from Hedgerow Yarns. It's an undyed fingering, superwash fingering tweed base, which I believe is 90% superwash and 10% or 85% superwash merino and 15% Donegal nep. And I really, really like it, except that, and I don't know if you're going to see this, I started wondering if this was a good color for me. And that seems like a crazy question to ask about essentially an undyed yarn. But it has a real sort of like slight grayness to it. And I swatched with it, and actually I did my first in the round swatch with these types of things at the back that people do so that you don't have to knit an entire round swatch. And when I finished this, I was like, do I like this? I really love the yarn. Does it look good? So I thought, oh, it's fine. I'm going to cast on. And actually, this is being held on some Barber Cables because I wanted to try it on. And as I started knitting, I started thinking, I don't know that I like this. The little doubts that I've had along the way just keep popping up. And so I don't think that I'm going to make this. I feel like this just looks dirty on me. I think this would look much nicer on somebody with a darker skin tone. I think on me, it somehow looks a little dirty. So I'm quite sure that I'm going to be ripping this out. I haven't gotten very far. And make it in, I wanted to choose something from my stash. And this is some Knitting for Olive in their cotton merino, which is I think 70 cotton, 30 merino. It's very white. But I think that next to it, you can see what I mean. And I think what I'm going to do with this is probably dye it so that I will be happier wearing that against my skin, because I just thought, no, this just doesn't look great on me. And this is very white. It's a little whiter than I had thought for my anchors, but I think it'll make a really nice summer sweater. We've started going back to the office. So some of us have been asked to go back into the office, mostly management and up, and I fall into that category. So we're going to the office twice a week now, which I have to say, I'm enjoying it. It's very nice to work at home, but I'm enjoying being out of the house. I'm enjoying seeing some other people, because it could be any given day of the week. There are some people, other days there are less people. But I'm enjoying going to the office, and it's also making me think about what I'm going to wear at the office, because I just about always wear my knits. So I think this is I'm just swatching, but this is very fine yarn, and I think I'm going to have to go down a needle size or two. So I'll be swatching, and hopefully I'll have cast that on next time, and we'll see what happens with this. So that's too bad. I was really disappointed, but there was like, I think this is not a great color for me. And when you think that, well, what are you going to do? So I think I'm probably going to dye that one day. I'm not going to rush, but yeah, those are my works in progress, my friends. And that is essentially the knitting that I'll be sharing with you. The rest of the podcast, I'll be telling you about Knit City Montreal and showing you the things that have come into my life from there, as well as some other things that have come into my life. Also I'll have podcast corner at the end. So if you want to hear some podcast mentions that perhaps will be new for you, then you can stick around for that as well. So just before I start talking about Knit City Montreal, I wanted to share a couple of things that have come into my life that have nothing to do with Knit City Montreal. First, I want to mention two patterns. I completely forgot to mention one of these last time. Actually, I forgot to mention both of these last time, and they were lovely gifts to me, and so I wanted to make sure to mention them. So one of them is a lovely pattern by my friend Annina, who is Annina Juuti, and she is a knitter. She's a podcaster, and she has one of the podcasts that I was going to mention later called Anni Juuti Knits. She is in Finland, but podcasts in English. She's also a designer, and she is a crazy color work designer. She seems to love color work and does incredible designs. And we were talking about heel construction one day, and so she said, I'll send you this pattern. So she sent me this pattern of her light as a feather sock pattern. I have to say, I've mentioned before, I am not thrilled with small circumference knitting, but I really do want to make colorwork socks one day, and I have some lovely patterns. This one is quite an amazing pattern, as you can see. So thank you so much for that, Annina. And the pattern, the heel construction on it, what was really interesting to me, just to see how, you know, what type of construction it was. So thank you so much for that, Annina. It's a heel flap, but it's a heel flap called a Dutch heel, I believe it was called. So yeah, so I've been looking at that and enjoying that. So thank you. And then the other one is a newly released pattern by Drk Everyday, also known as Barber Knit. Linda is on Instagram as Barber Knit, and she also has a podcast, but she hasn't podcasted in, I'm going to say almost a year, at least more than a half a year. I believe her podcast is called Barber Knits. I'll put it down here because suddenly I'm not remembering. But she released, I believe, her first pattern recently called the Münster, I think, which is this amazing colorwork cowl pattern, and absolutely beautiful. So I completely forgot to mention it last time, and I just wanted to thank you so much, Linda, for that. And it's a gorgeous pattern. So it's on Ravelry, and you can find her as Barber Knits on Instagram. So thank you very much for that. And I haven't had a chance to watch Amy Palco's most recent episode yet, but I believe she has a giveaway for this. So you can head on over and check that out on Amy's channel as well. So yeah, the other thing that has come into my life is my friend Lauren, who I met at the Ulin retreat in 2019. Lauren lives in New Mexico, and we've become good friends and chat regularly. She sent me a package with some mittens in it. Isn't that sweet? Which is awesome because I hate making mittens. I seem to do silly things. In fact, I should show them to you. I have one pair of mittens where one mitten is longer than the other, and I didn't realize it when I was making it, and I was just by the time I realized, I was too lazy to go back and fix it. I have another pair of mittens that I tried to design myself, and the gusset doesn't fit properly, and I didn't weave in ends properly. It's got holes in it, and I just thought, just have very bad knitting mojo. Well, she made me a lovely pair that are sort of a bulky weight. It was some sort of a kit. Not quite sure what kind of kit. So thank you so much for that, Lauren. There were, of course, other goodies in there, like chocolates and coffee, which are being enjoyed. So thank you so much for that. And then this is an acquisition that I got from Alex Collins, Alex Collins Designs. I've mentioned her podcast before, but she is first and foremost a printer. She prints these incredible fabrics. And this one is a 2-color one with these beautiful bees. And she makes all kinds of different bags. This one is a drawstring bag that would probably be good for about 2 skeins, or as a sock bag. And it came with this beautiful pink fabric. And when she showed this one, I was just like, I really need one of those. I have been looking at her work for years, and always enjoyed it. And her sense is just, her sense of pattern, and it's just so beautiful and so lovely and pretty and whimsical. So I'm so glad to finally have a Alex Collins bag. So my next sock project is going to go in there. And she also sent me a little notebook that she has also printed. It also has her name on the back, and it is a little unlined notebook. And I love a notebook, so that was really lovely. Thank you for that, Alex. Inside the bag is plain fabric, but you also have her signature in there. So really stunning, lovely canvas fabric, just really, really nice. So thank you very much. Another bag to add to my collection. So those are the things I wanted to mention before I started talking about Knit City Montreal. I think I was high on yarn fumes and excitement the whole weekend. By the end of it, quite exhausted, and actually ended up with a tiny bit of migraine and just really, really tired. It took me a few days to recover from that. I suspect that was not an unusual scenario, especially for the people who were vending at the show. It was intense, but it was great. So I arrived in Montreal on Friday, early afternoon. And as you know, if you've been here before, I was going to be helping Rose of Kara Yarns vend for the weekend. So I was going to be in her booth. I was arriving on Friday, was going to help her set up, and then I was going to go out for dinner. And when I got to Montreal, she wasn't ready. So I thought, well, perhaps I should knit. Perhaps I should visit a yarn store. I had never been to La Maison Tricotée, which is on Guildford Street in Montreal, on the Plateau, which is kind of a central part of Montreal. And so I decided to go in there. Now, before going to Montreal, I had sort of made a list of some things that I wouldn't mind buying yarn for. And I'm going to tell you right now, what happened is that I bought all the yarn I needed on Friday. And so I actually did not buy yarn at the festival. I know, that's crazy, but that's what happened. And I'll tell you why. Really, I think what happened was that I ended up buying a bag full of yarn on Friday at Maison Tricotée and Espace Tricot because Rose wasn't ready when I had finished with La Maison Tricotée. So I went over to Monkland and went over to Espace Tricot and ended up buying more yarn there. And then I ended up going to the Sheraton Centre where the Knit City Montreal show was going to take place, and helped out a bit. Then I went out for dinner with Nancy Wheeler, who she had done the By the Shore socks that I showed you a couple of episodes ago. And she actually has a new pattern release as well, another great sock pattern called, I think they're called the Buku Pouch socks, and or was it the Buku Pouch Boardwalk? I'll put it down here. So we went out for dinner, and then I went back and helped with the setup. So, right. So that's kind of what happened on Friday. Let me share with you in some sort of order. This is Selma of the future. Hello. I'm back a couple of days later because as I was editing my podcast, it was clear that this segment of the podcast was somehow corrupt. I had some technical issues because my phone was full, which I explained to you in, I think, the deleted portion of this. And so I had to record, but I think that this segment that was right here had somehow been corrupt, even though it was saved on my phone and I cannot get it on the computer. So I thought either I re-record the entire podcast next week, or I just pop in and record this segment, which I have decided to do, which is what I've decided to do. So hello, a couple of days later, Gertie is still with me with my fennel tea. So yeah, so the rest of the podcast will be a combination of me today and me from a couple of days ago. So what I was going to tell you here is that my first stop was at La Maison Tricotée, which is on Guildford Street in Montreal. It's sort of on the plateau area of Montreal, and I'd never been there. So I wanted to go. And one of the reasons I wanted to go there was that I knew that they had some Cascade Heritage sock yarn there, which is something that I have wanted to try because Alex Collins, again, who I enjoy watching, she has used that yarn a lot. She bought it, I think, originally to photograph with her bags because, as I mentioned, she's a bag maker. And I showed you her bag, right? I think I did. And she had said that the yarn was actually very nice wearing and so forth. So I wanted to pop into La Maison Tricotée and get a skein of this. And I did. I got it in this gorgeous yellow color. So I am planning on making the fairy tale socks, which I showed you last time, a design by Vicky from the, was it D19 Eco-Friendly Life Etsy shop. She's a maker in Ukraine, designer, as well as maker of wooden items. And I mentioned to you that she's in Ukraine, and I had bought patterns from her. So I got this yellow. I'm hoping that once I finish the black socks, that is going to get cast on. And so that was the first thing. But I went with some items, a list of potential projects to buy yarn for. And as I looked around La Maison Tricotée, I saw this beautiful yarn by Life in the Long Grass called Hinterland in this stunning copper color. Although they also had a really beautiful brown. And this happened to be on sale, actually. And I was just taken by the depth of color in all of the browns. Well, actually there were two browns, two different kinds of browns, and this one. And I was struggling between one of the browns and this, but I settled on this in the end because I thought this would make a beautiful pink velvet by Andrea Mowry. And so these came home with me. Very, very nice. So then that was what I got at La Maison Tricotée, but I had a really good look around. Lovely shop. Definitely be going again. And the people there were so lovely. And I ended up chatting with them again here and there at the festival because they had a booth. So my next stop, because Rose still wasn't quite ready to set up the booth, I thought, well, I'll just pop over to Espace Tricot. So I hopped in the car and drove across. It's actually a lovely drive from the plateau to Monkland Avenue where Espace Tricot is located. You go kind of not over the mountain completely, but sort of along the mountain. And so it's a bit of a curvy, windy road, and it's a beautiful area with beautiful houses. So it's a lovely drive there. So I got there and I wanted to get yarn to go with this. Although I wasn't at the time completely sold on the idea of this becoming a pink velvet, and I was looking at other yarns. I was looking at some yarns by Sonder as a potential fingering weight and so forth. But one thing for sure was that I picked up this Suri alpaca, which is what you would use for the color work for the pink velvet. And I was quite taken by it. And so I was putting it together with the other yarns, and everybody was like, yeah, those are nice. And then I thought, I'm gonna go back to the car and get this yarn. So I went to the car, got this yarn, put that together, and everybody was like, that's the winning combination. So this should be becoming at some point, in hopefully the near future, a pink velvet. But I just thought that's gonna be really, really fun. So that was my first purchase at Espace Tricot. The other thing that I knew I wanted to get most likely was either the Sunday Morning by Sonder yarn in their fingering weight or in their DK weight. And my thought was to really just look at the colorways at the festival and not necessarily buy them there, because I thought I can always buy them another time, order them, and then pick them up when I'm on my way to Montreal sometime. But then I happened to start looking at them at Espace Tricot, and I was very set on this one color, and so I just decided to get it, which is this glorious pink which is called A Sunday Kind of Love. Isn't that pretty? So this this is what I was thinking about when I got this was the Drk Everyday sweater, another design by Andrea Mowry. I seem to be in a little bit of an Andrea Mowry phase, and it's a very simple yoke sweater, but every time I see a version of it, I'm drawn to it. I think, what is that? Oh, it's the Drk Everyday sweater again. And it just seems to have a very nice fit. And I thought that that could be just a lovely, simple sweater. And it's such a pretty color, such a pretty color. So I went and got it. And now I'll stop my future Selma so that you can go back to the past Selma and listen to the rest of it. Purchase at Espace Tricot. And then lastly, just to mention this one skein that I bought of the Shibui vine. This was actually on sale. And I bought this to go with two other yarns that I have to make a striping top. One is a sort of beigey taupe and the other one is a bright green. So it's kind of a shocking combination. But I bought this, it was on sale, and I've always wanted to try this yarn. Very, very interesting. It's a paper, silk and cotton blend, and it's a wrapped yarn. I don't know if you can see that. And so I bought one for the striping of the top. So we'll see when that gets made, hopefully this summer. But summer comes and goes very, very quickly. So that's essentially what I got. If you've been on the Espace Tricot site, you'll know that they have a whole series of stationery type products. So I did buy a fountain pen. They have the Kaweco fountain pens, which are on sale on their website, by the way. And I really like that fountain pen. I had bought one already and I love it, and I'm enjoying the second one. The first one I bought was the rose gold version, which is actually, I believe, metal body, and it's a bit of a heavier pen than the one that I got last weekend. So they write a little differently. I really love the heavy body one, but I also really like the other one, which is a plastic one. And the tip is very nice on the Kaweco pens, if you're a fountain pen lover like I am. So that is what I got. Then I went, I had, I helped to set the booth up a bit, and I also had dinner with Nancy. Nancy and I went out for dinner, and Nancy very kindly gifted me this wonderful leather bracelet by a maker called Dodo. I'll put the full name down here. She's on Etsy, and she's a Ukrainian maker. And living, not 100% sure where, but I believe in the East Coast. And she makes these bracelets and different leather works. Nancy gave that to me, and I just love it. It's great. So thank you so much, Nancy. It was fun, really fun. And so fun when you go to an event and you get to meet people that you've only known online, but you feel like you know already. It's just great. So yeah, so then Saturday morning came along and the festival started. And I have to say, first of all, thank you so much to all of you that came by to say hello. I really appreciated it. It was so wonderful to meet people. Really, really nice. And yeah, it just filled my heart. So thank you for saying hello. And it was such a pleasure to meet the people who watch the podcast, other knitters. I met some new people, and it was just such a pleasure. Now, ironically, I shopped at La Maison Tricotée and I bought Sandra yarn at Espace Tricot, and the Akara booth was near the main entrance, and on one side was the La Maison Tricotée booth, who had completely different yarn than what I bought. They didn't have that at the festival. And on the other side of us was the Sonder booth, which was a stunning booth. Both of them had beautiful booths, and they were extremely busy all weekend. So I'm really glad that I just didn't have that pressure of having to try and decide on a colorway at Sonder during the festival. So what came home with me from the festival? first, I'm going to show you, as I said, I didn't buy any yarn, but I did get some yarn from Rose. And I'll show you what I got from her. Beautiful, beautiful yarns from Rose. This one is a sock set, which is a 80% superwash, 20% nylon. This one happened to be sitting in a basket full of sock sets. And I kept admiring it, thinking, oh, that's really lovely. But then I realized, oh no, I don't want that to go when someone picked it up. And I thought, oh no, they're taking it. And then they didn't. And so it came home with me. Beautiful, beautiful lilac colored sock set. So very, very lovely. And then the other yarn that came home with me is this wonderful superwash merino yak nylon sock, which I'm very, very excited to try. The colors were all super rich and beautiful. And I couldn't decide between the green and the red for a while, but then I went with the green. So yeah, really, really beautiful. And then the one that is going to be cast on shortly is this, also from Akara, because Rose was very kind and paid me in yarn for the weekend. So this is a silk linen blend. It's 65% silk, 35% linen, and I admired it all weekend. And as the quantities of yarn were diminishing, I thought, uh-oh, especially when somebody walked by wearing a top called the Este top by Justina Lakoska. It's a top that has just a little bit of a lace detail on the shoulders, and it's a bit of a saddle shoulder construction, but it's a summer top, so that doesn't go into sleeves. And when I saw that, I was like, that's what I want to make with this. I've since changed my mind. I think I'm going to be making the Opale by Emily Vallée, who's a Quebec designer. And I'm so looking forward to this. Rose had a sample knit in this yarn, which was just buttery gorgeousness. And it's really, really beautiful. So I'm very excited about this. This is going to get wound up and knit into a top very soon. One of my summer makes for this year. So those were glorious gifts from Rose. Now, the other couple of things that I bought were non-yarny related. A lovely pouch from Buku. I would have bought a huge bag, except that I was, as I said, kind of overwhelmed. I couldn't decide. But this one came home with me, which is just adorable. Little, kind of like a little notions pouch that opens with this sort of metallic bouncy system here. And it was very nice to meet Aruna of Buku. Actually, it's funny because I have this other pouch here and I showed this to her. This is a pouch that I bought from Buku long before, well, she said, wow, that's vintage, because I showed it to her. I bought this at the One of a Kind show in Toronto at least 10 years ago. Possibly more, maybe 13 years ago, when she was selling at the One of a Kind show. And I have used this for lipsticks in the past, but recently it has become a notions pouch where I have a measuring tape and stitch markers and stuff like that. So I now have another one. I like a smaller pouch. So I was mentioning to her that I thought this size was fabulous. And so now there's this one too. So I'm going to be happy and excited to use this one as well. And then the other couple of items that I got this Knitter's Joint Salve from the Julie Asselin booth. Julie Asselin had her yarn there, but she had lots of different things. And she had some products by this maker whose shop was called, darn it, what was it called? Sunflower Knit. There is the logo. And so this is a salve that is made of olive oil infused with yarrow, arnica, St. John's wort, thyme, calendula, comfrey root, white willow bark, with some beeswax, some essential oils as well. And it's got a wonderfully sort of slightly eucalyptusy sage kind of smell to it. And it's meant for areas where knitters might struggle. Like, I don't know about you, but my thumbs sometimes get a little bit sore. And sometimes, I don't know why, but this middle finger. So I have been putting it there. It certainly feels nice, and I've really enjoyed it. And I love hand products, as you may have noticed, because I tend to buy pretty much every single one of my little pouches has a tuft woolen in it, because I use it all the time. But I just love hand creams in general, especially more natural ones. And then from Katlyn Pelletier, who is Katlyn Illustration on Etsy. I'll put her shop down here. I've bought her things before because she's been at the Twist Fibre Festival, and I think Espace Tricot has also carried her cards. But she makes the most beautiful knitting related cards. So I got a pack of 5. There's always some sort of knitting or yarn in the images. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? They are so wonderful. I thought, well, that's me. And this one too, which is so pretty. So I bought some cards from her, and that was really what I got. It was a very busy weekend, so there wasn't a whole lot of time once the festival started to walk around. I really enjoyed working in the booth, as I think I've already mentioned. It was so wonderful to meet so many other makers. Had a chat with the guys from Cabin Boy Knits, with Melissa, of course, of Sandra Yarns. Lisa was there helping her as well, with the women from La Maison Tricotée, with Julia Slay. Oh my gosh, so many. It was really, really fun to, the grocery girls were there as well, so I had a chat with them. And it was just, I think everybody was so happy to be in that environment. It really was so fun. It was wonderful to speak with makers, to see all the beautiful and inspiring knits, and be working in a booth, which was a great way to just see what was going on and meet people, as I said earlier, the makers. It was really great. I really enjoyed it. And I hope that there'll be an opportunity to do it again. There is absolutely no word as to whether Knit City Montreal will happen again next year, but there will be other festivals as well. So certainly I have to say it was really wonderful to be among knitters and to be talking about what we love. So it was great fun, and really appreciated being able to get to know Rose as well. And Patricia of Paradise Island Bags was with us on the Saturday, and it was just so much fun. So yeah, so that was Knit City Montreal. I'm kind of trying to think, was there something else that I wanted to tell you about that? Yeah, so many beautiful makers. Les Belles Bouclettes was there, who's a maker who works primarily with mohairs, but she doesn't make mohair in the mohair silk tradition that we're used to, where we're double stranding. It's really mohair more as wool, and her work just blows my mind, so I've taken note of that. There was somebody else who had some very interesting yarn. Coco Laine is another one that I wrote down that will be at Twist this summer, and so will Les Belles Bouclettes. So I wrote down some yarns. I thought, you know what? Next time, these are the ones that perhaps I'll purchase. But for now, I thought, I think I've come home. I've made up for the last 3 months of not buying yarn. So I'm just enjoying looking at my absolute yarny mess that is the state around me at the moment. So that's what I'm going to share with you in terms of acquisitions today. And just quickly, I'll share some of the podcasts from Podcast Corner this week. So I've already mentioned a couple of podcasts because I mentioned to you Annina Joti from the Sock Pattern. So actually she was one of the ones that I was going to mention today. I thought I'd mention some Finnish-based podcasts since, as you know, I'm half Finnish. So that is a And somebody spoke to me in Finnish at the Knit City Montreal. I wanted to say hello to you. I cannot remember your name at all. So that was really exciting. I spoke a few words of Finnish, and then I thought, okay, that's probably all I can handle today. That was really fun. So I mentioned to you already, Anni Juuti Knits. Annina has an English podcast, English-speaking podcast. She is in Finland. And I really enjoy Annina's podcast and started watching it before we actually also started chatting. So really enjoy her podcast. She's a great maker, makes a lot of different things, and is also a designer, as I mentioned. And although she has designed a lot of color work, she knits all kinds of things, and I really enjoy her podcast. I also wanted to mention Finnish Knitting Stories with Jana. Jana hasn't been podcasting a lot lately because she's been very involved in the Ukrainian efforts, but she did put out an episode the other day where she talked a lot about her experience and was very emotional about her experience with what is going on in the Ukraine, because she is directly involved from various aspects. But she has a lovely podcast as well. And although she talked some about knitting in her last podcast, she was wearing a beautiful work that she had just recently made. And so hers is one that I never miss. And then a Finnish language podcast. I imagine if you're in Finland, you know about this. If you're like me, that you like to listen to Finnish podcasts to practice your Finnish, or if you have subtitles. Probably my favorite Finnish podcast is called Nupu Nupu. And Maria Kostamavara, I think is her name, is also a designer. And she works in a yarn shop, I think in Tampere. She has a lovely podcast, often podcasts with her husband, although he hasn't appeared recently. She doesn't podcast often, but the aesthetic in her podcast is so beautiful that I just enjoy it. It's so wonderful. So I would say aesthetically, probably one of my favorite podcasts. There's just a quality to it that's so wonderful. So that's a Finnish language podcast. I also wanted to mention, although I've mentioned her before, The Thoughtful Knitter by Ailey. In the comments from 2 episodes ago when people were writing their list, lots of people had mentioned her podcast, so I thought I would mention it here too. Ailey is in Scotland, has a wonderful Scottish accent for those of us who enjoy those things, and is a fabulous knitter. So she recently made an incredible sweater by, oh dear, Emily of the Green Bean podcast, I think, which has kind of beetles on it. It's really beautiful. So Ailey's a great knitter and a lovely friend as well. Also wanted to mention Earth Tones Girl. For those of you who are sock knitters, you must know Denise. Denise has a wonderful, kind-hearted and warm-spirited podcast. And she's also a teacher, especially of sock making. So if you are somebody who enjoys sock making or would like to learn more about sock making, Denise is a great, great resource for that. Also wanted to mention another podcast who is a relatively new podcaster, is, I've forgotten her first name. She's in Western Canada and she has the Bluebird Box. And she's also a designer and has lovely makes and is also a lovely, gentle spirit on the screen. And I really enjoy her podcast. I think she only has a few out because she started not too long ago. And then an audio podcast to check out is the Fibre Nation, which is one that was mentioned also a few times in the list. So if you're looking for an audio podcast, that is one for you to check out as well. I mentioned last time Yarns at Yinhu, and this time Fibre Nation. So that's my podcast corner for this time. So on this Easter weekend, as I mentioned earlier, we will be going to this place called Montebello. There's a fancy schmancy hotel that we are going to for one night, crowding into a couple of rooms. It's going to be spending time together and playing games, and we'll see what else we get up to for one night, and then we're going to Montreal. And last weekend I had a wonderful walk on around Meech Lake with a friend of mine. But other than that, I'm trying to think of what has been going on. Not a huge amount. Life has somehow been busy. Returning to the office has definitely taken up some time. So yeah. So I had some footage for you at the beginning. What I'm going to be leaving you off with is some scenes from Knit City Montreal for you to have a look at, with also, of course, the same song I always play at the end, because every single episode, at least one person, but often multiple people, comment that they so much love the song I Love You Only for Barefoot McCoy that I play at the end. So I just leave it there for those of you who adore that song every time. So until next time, friends, take care. Happy knitting. Bye.
The stars have come in close just to see you, I suppose. And they're a-gleaming, you must be dreaming. And the sun has said goodbye with a twinkle in his eye. He's left the ocean with sweet emotion. We go dancing in the rain, riding on a midnight train, away so slowly. And the moon is looking down on the sleepy side of town, and he's so lonely. I love you only. I love you only. All the birds have taken flight. It's their favorite time of night, when they can hear you from somewhere near you. And the palm trees try to bend to be closer to their friends. They're made of magic. Reach out and grab it. We go dancing in the rain,